Hi there, podcast and public radio fans. Heath Drusen here, host and creator of the Extremely American podcast. I'm working on season 3, which is an urgent story about neo-Nazi terrorists and how they helped build a modern white supremacist movement, even from prison. Some of their ideas have even made it to today's White House. It's both a gripping true crime story and a timely warning about threats to our democracy. And this time, my investigative reporting is funded by you. To support the project, please make a tax-deductible contribution at extremelyamerican.org. That's extremelyamerican.org. And thanks.
From the studios of Boise State Public Radio News, I'm Samantha Wright, filling in for Jimmy Gaudette. This is Idaho Matters. It's Friday, time for our Reporter Roundtable. That's when we get you up to date on all the news that made headlines this past week. Today, our panel includes Nate Eaton, news director at eastidahonews.com, Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun, and Kevin Fixler, investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman. And I should mention that for the next few minutes, we will be talking about Idaho's death penalty and how the new firing squad will work. And we're also going to talk about a rape case before we continue with the rest of the roundtable. Okay, Kevin, you took an in-depth look at the new firing squad system for Idaho's death penalty inmates. And before we get there, can you give us a little recap on how we got to this point with this method?
Sure thing. Hey, Sam. In February of 2024, Idaho attempted to execute a prisoner, Thomas Creech, a 73-year-old man who has spent now more than 50 years in Idaho prison, most of which has been on death row. And they were using lethal injection and unable to find a suitable vein for an IV in order to deliver the chemicals to Creech. They attempted for about an hour and then called off the execution. The year prior, actually, the Idaho legislature, led by Representative Bruce Skog of Nampa, had added firing squad as a backup method of execution in the state. And then we had this incident, the first time it had ever happened in Idaho. Thomas Creech is now one of the very few people who has survived an execution in the entire United States and still lives today on death row. And as a result of being unable to execute him and fulfill the death penalty, the legislature returned in 2025 and passed a law that prioritizes the firing squad. Brad Little signed that into law, and it was delayed until to take effect until July of this year, so that the Idaho Department of Correction could renovate its execution chamber in order to provide for firing squad.
Well, you found out how this method works, and we've kind of been waiting to find out. So give us some of the mechanics. This is a little creepy. What will happen the next time a prisoner is executed? First, they're going to be offered a couple of sedatives. Then they're strapped down to a chair. Describe this process now that we know what it is.
Before we even get there, a death warrant has to be issued for one of the death row inmates, and that usually starts a clock of 30 days. From there, they go through any sort of last-minute litigation and appeals, which certainly crop up for each individual, and their attorneys attempt to prevent this from happening. I believe there will be additional litigation tied to a firing squad, so we can sort of foresee that coming before any of this would take place. But during that 30 days, there's additional trainings that take place for the members who will participate in a firing squad. And basically, the prison system prepares for this. On the day of, or actually the day before, there is a last meal for the prisoner. That is a real thing. And then, as you noted, a sedative will be offered to the prisoner the night before, and then 4 hours before as well. That person will be escorted into the execution chamber, which is newly renovated to plan for this firing squad. The director of the prison system will then read the death warrant aloud for witnesses and for the condemned individual. They will be granted an opportunity at any sort of last words. They can request an eye mask before they sort of face the executioners. And the director, or actually, excuse me, a leader of the firing squad will then um, go through a cadence. And, I don't know that it's ready, aim, fire, but it might be a countdown from three. And the three shooters will then fire their weapons simultaneously.
Okay, and one of the biggest mysteries with this process was who would be doing the shooting. So what have you found out now?
Yeah, the prison system, after more than a year, finally released a standard operating procedure related to this method, an SOP. And in the buildup to this, the director was actually attempting to locate a remote operated system in order to avoid corrections officers having to pull the triggers and face the trauma of ending someone's life. And so what they've now decided through this SOP is that they're going to seek out volunteers, members of law enforcement who are post certified, having gone through the necessary peace officer training and have that certification for at least 3 years. They need to be in good standing with no use of force or gun related incidents in the past year. And I would say it's fairly controversial that we're asking members of law enforcement to take on this responsibility, and that includes to prevent members of the prison system from having to themselves do it.
Well, and as you found out, at least one law enforcement representative doesn't like using police officers for this. What did they say? Why did they object?
Yeah, I spoke with Sergeant Brian Lovell, who's the president of the Idaho Fraternal Order of Police. And while he had not yet seen these protocols, the SOP from the Department of Correction, he wanted to really emphasize the fact that law enforcement isn't trained to kill people. That was really important to him. While they are trained in helping people through trauma, emergency situations, and unfortunately, from time to time, use of force, including deadly force, they're not really designed and planning for, again, to kill someone. In this case, a planned, scheduled execution. And so he really wanted to emphasize that point, that while it makes some sense to him that people would think that police would be better suited, and there will probably be people who do volunteer feeling that this is a part of their sworn duty or fulfilling justice, a court-ordered sentence or that of a jury. He did just want to emphasize that police also face trauma and aren't necessarily geared or designed to also work through this sort of trauma or process it.
Well, and here's a question I just thought of. Do the folks who end up on the firing squad, are they going to get any kind of help if they need it, if they have concerns afterward?
Actually, Sergeant Lovell mentioned that in more recent years, and maybe not historically, but law enforcement has done better. And I think also the Department of Correction, for its own workforce, its prison guards and so forth, are gearing people toward and veering people toward additional mental health support. So I don't know that something is baked specifically into the Idaho Department of Correction SOP for a firing squad. I do believe, and as Sergeant Lovell had said to me, police forces are better at recognizing the need for officers who go through traumatic events to seek help or to at least offer those resources. And he thought in more recent times that that's really become real positive within law enforcement across the country and including in Idaho.
Okay. So how much did it cost to set up this new method, and what kinds of guns will be used? Because this was kind of a topic of conversation after your article came out.
Sure. It's 308 caliber rifles. Specifically, the model is made by Daniel Defense is the manufacturer. It's an AR style weapon. These ones actually that they've already purchased for about $5,000 a piece are technically pistols actually, but they have a stock and so forth. But they have scopes and suppressors, and they will use basically a stand, a bipod. Still working out some kind of final details related to whether or not the shooters will be standing or seated. They will be behind a protective barrier when they do shoot. But so they've dropped about $24,000 on that, and then what was the other part of the question?
How much did everything else cost?
Oh, sure. Yep.
Yeah, because
So
they had to build a whole new thing, right?
$24,000 for the rifles, and
Mhm.
then the renovation of the execution chamber actually between engineering, construction, and also uh, the design, which took over a year. Now more than $1.2 million to set this whole thing up at the prison, the maximum prison in Cuna.
Wow. Okay, so, and I guess how many prisoners are on Idaho death row, and when does the new method kick in?
July 1st is when the law takes effect. I don't think people should anticipate that we will have an immediate execution by any means. I mentioned there was litigation, both for the individual prisoners and their appeals, but also what we could anticipate specific to this method. And there are currently 8 members on Idaho death row, most of them men, and they're based in the maximum security prison. As I mentioned in Cuna, the most recent addition to that was Chad Daybell. So again, while July 1st is just a few weeks away, um, I would think that an execution could be some months, if not next year, before we see this method put into practice.
Okay, well, thanks, Kevin. I'm guessing we're going to see you back, as you said, after July 1st, because there's going to be more to this story. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for the time.
Okay, and we've got one more disturbing story. This one is about a former deputy coroner charged with everything from rape to having child sexual abuse materials. And Nate, this case that East Idaho News reported on started after reports from 2 women. Is that right?
Yeah, this is concerning the Bannock County Deputy Coroner, so the Pocatello area. Jonathan Farnsworth is charged with 1 felony count of rape, sexual exploitation of a child, and 4 felony counts of lewd conduct with a child, along with some additional charges that just came out. These women say that well, the first victim said that it was back in the late 90s when she was just a child, 5 years old, that he started to sexually abuse her and that it continued for years. And it got to the point where just last month, she's now an adult, she went to meet with him while wearing a wire, a police wire, and he admitted, according to the court documents, that he did have sexual contact with this young woman. And then a second victim came forward who was a friend of the first one who said that the same things happened to her back when she was a child, that he uh, sexually abused her, raped her when she was a teenager, and that they had been living in fear for all of these years, afraid to say something, nervous about what to do, and they decided to come forward, especially because he's in a prominent role. And Farnsworth was arrested and booked into jail just a couple of weeks ago.
And then after he was arrested, they searched his phone, and then that's when the new charges were filed, right? Because of what they found on the phone.
That's right. They seized his phone after he was arrested, and they found multiple images showing child sex abuse material. And they were able to add on these additional charges. And these were really, horrific photos, sadly, that are becoming more commonplace. So it seems with the internet and social media websites and things like that. And so he's now facing 11 charges of possession of CSAM, which is the child sexual exploitative material. The unit out of the Attorney General's office, the task force, is really going against these types of charges heavy within the past few years across the state, trying to find people who are distributing these child abuse images or taking the images or selling them. There's like a black market, you could say, on the corners of the internet where people are able to exchange these photos, and this man allegedly had them just right on his cell phone.
Wow. Okay, so what happens now? When is the next court date?
Well, first of all, he's lost his job. He's no longer the
Ah,
coroner. He's no longer working with the coroner's office. They've confirmed that they have let him go, and he is in the Bannock County Jail, and he will be back in court in on July 14th. And so we will see if he has what his defense is, and if he has anything more to say.
all right. Keep us up to date on that story. Okay, Nate, I want to switch to a different story. This one is about a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals judge who's up on charges after an argument over parking. Tell us about this case.
Yeah, this is Ryan Nelson. He's based here in Idaho Falls. He's a judge for the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. He's been on the bench since 2018. And there is surveillance footage that the news outlets, Idaho State Journal, was able to get a hold of, and that we have since viewed, showing an incident that happened back in April. Nelson pulls into a parking lot, and there's a dispute over the parking space. I believe the other man is in the spot next to him says, "Learn to park," something like that.
Ooh.
And this altercation ensues, you could say, where Judge Nelson kind of follows the man across the parking lot, grabs his glasses off of his face, throws them to the ground, and stomps on them. As the man is saying, expletives, they're both kind of yelling back and forth. This happened back in April, but the news we didn't hear about this until just last week, and Judge Nelson was charged with misdemeanors, battery, and malicious injury to property. Now, normally, misdemeanors happen every day; they're not covered a lot in the news, but the fact that he is on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, this story has now gone nationwide. The New York Times had a story about this yesterday, Bloomberg, a lot of the national outlets, simply because it is such a prestigious a prestigious role to serve on the bench.
Right. You mentioned the video. But did Nelson admit to any of this going on?
Nelson, through his attorney, it says that he never touched the man. And his attorney said this conduct is not representative of who Ryan is. We're going to see this process through. So there's no denial, other than the fact he says he never touched the man. And that could be true based on the video. You do see him, though, grab the glasses and throw them to the floor. This isn't the first time that he has been in the news. Back in 2021, I believe, the Wall Street Journal, or actually in 2018, reported that Judge Nelson had received at least 28 traffic citations over the previous 2 decades, including more than a dozen speeding tickets. So we'll see what happens with this. He's due in court in a few weeks. Again, there's misdemeanors, so he might face a fine. He could face a couple of days in jail if found guilty or if he pleads to it. But that's where the case stands, at least in the criminal realm.
And you reported that he's also facing a judicial misconduct inquiry. Do we know anything about that?
Yeah, so this was interesting. This came from the Ninth Circuit, the board, the judicial um, council, I guess you could say, of the Ninth Circuit. And they put this out on Monday, saying whenever there's information constituting reasonable grounds for an inquiry into whether a judge engaged in judicial misconduct, then we can conduct an investigation. And that has been launched. And they said when incidents of alleged misconducts are reported in an accredited media publication, we have identified a complaint and initiated the inquiry. So the Ninth Circuit is looking into this. They do note in their notice that they only received this information very recently. This happened back in April. We don't know if he told the Ninth Circuit that this happened, but the fact that they say they only learned about it very recently would make you wonder if they just found out about it last week.
Okay, so what happens next? I think you mentioned there's another court date.
There's another court date. As far as his job, he's still on the bench. He hasn't been removed from the bench or anything like that. I think that the Ninth Circuit will do their investigation and probably interview the alleged victim and look at the video and all that and decide whether he should be reprimanded or how that will work. And then he will appear in court on June 18th for a pretrial conference. And he could plead guilty, he could plead not guilty, he could take it all the way to a trial. They could work out some sort of plea agreement. So we'll see what happens when this appears in court next week.
Okay, thank you, Nate. Laura, hi. You found out how Idaho farmers are feeling about the new proposed new farm bill in Congress. So let's take a look. Let's look at a few parts of the bill first. There are some changes in the bill that farmers like. What are these changes?
Yeah, so it's a pretty giant bill. It's like over 900 pages. But there are some changes. The farm bill that people are operating under right now hasn't been like truly updated since 2018. And, it's normally supposed to be every 5 years. So really a lot of the updates are just trying to reflect current conditions. For instance, there's a raise on some like loan borrowing limits to better just reflect the reality of the cost to start a new operation or to expand one. Um, there's also the addition of specialty crops into some of these like crop insurance programs, and specialty crops can include like hops or potatoes. So obviously, there's a lot of farmers in Idaho that are paying attention to things like that.
I thought it was interesting when I read your story that potatoes weren't part of that list at one point. I was like, really? Potatoes?
I was also surprised by that. I had to go and double check that.
Okay. All right. So, especially when you're talking about things like export markets and expanding, I know Idaho has sent delegations places to try and, expand how much, because we send a lot of products. We get a lot of money from export products. And that's in your article too. The new bill also talks, or did, about pesticide immunity, but I think that got taken out. Tell us about what this is, because Idaho tried to do this as well.
Yeah, so pretty much right before the House passed their version of the Farm Bill, there had been these provisions in there that would have pretty much provided a good amount of liability immunity to pesticide manufacturers against allegations of like health impacts. The conversation has really kind of centered around glyphosate, which is used in Roundup. And that, like you said, that is a familiar thing in Idaho. There was pretty much the same proposals made in the Idaho legislature in 24 and 2025. And there was a lot of money spent by Bayer, which makes Roundup, trying to push those bills.
All right. Also, SNAP benefits are part of this bill, or have been in the past. Tell us about SNAP benefits and some of the things you found out about that and what's been going on with them in relation to the bill.
Yeah, so the SNAP is actually the by far the largest part of the bill. It's a pretty big program, and as you might remember, last summer about this time of year, the Big Beautiful Bill was going through Congress, and they made some changes to SNAP. They reduced spending. They kind of decreased the federal share of how much they'll pay for the administration of it, which increases the state share. There are also some changes made to work requirements, expanding them to more people. So they pretty much cut spending in that program in the Big Beautiful Bill, and this Farm Bill maintains those cuts. So that was kind of a point of disagreement among many Republicans and Democrats. Democrats were wanting some of those cuts to be restored in it, but they ultimately weren't, at least in the version that's being considered in the Senate right now.
Gotcha. And so do Idaho farmers like the bill? Do they want it? And what's next for the bill?
From the folks that I talked to, I think there's a few things here and there they'd like changed or added or what have you. But I think ultimately, because these provisions have been in there for so long and not really been updated, they're just really wanting something to get passed and something that really better reflects the conditions that they're working under right now.
Laura, the Big Beautiful Bill is sending some cash to Idaho, and Idaho Health and Welfare is looking for organizations who might want to spend it. There are apparently two grant opportunities. Can you tell us about them? This is a really interesting story.
There's actually 3 grant opportunities open
Ooh.
right now, but one really is dealing with project management and kind of just the more technical side of overseeing it. But the really healthcare related ones there are 2, both related to maternal and baby health. One is focus on obstetrics and obstetrics readiness, which is kind of making sure facilities are ready to deal with emergencies during pregnancy or birth. And then another one has to do with perinatal quality collaboratives, which are pretty much just networks of teams that are aimed at improving the quality of healthcare for mothers and babies and identifying processes in need of improvement around that. And they're trying to increase the number of those collaboratives in rural health facilities.
And yeah, these are pretty much designed to help rural Idaho, right? This is what these are fostered around.
Yeah, the federal grant is for rural healthcare. Under Idaho's application, the definition of rural really almost includes the entire state. So basically, all of Idaho is rural. Not the Treasure Valley, but pretty much outside of the few major cities that we have. Basically, everywhere is eligible for this money, and then also, a lot of Idaho rural facilities are really in need of it right now.
Gotcha. And there are some other grant opportunities as part of the bill, I think, that I saw in there that you've reported on in the past.
Yeah, so the department is really trying to bring on board more funding opportunities. There are 4 that they've posted that are listed as pretty much almost ready to go. They're just awaiting review from state legislators to make sure they can get the go-ahead to post them. But those other ones have to deal with workforce development in rural healthcare settings, doing a technology assessment for rural health facilities, a cybersecurity assessment, and then they're also looking at someone to review proposed renovation projects that some of these facilities are wanting to do.
So what's the timeline on these grants? I thought I saw somewhere in your story that if we don't use it, we lose it.
Yeah, so I think maybe a couple weeks ago when we talked to it, this was really stressed by a federal official overseeing it, that if Idaho doesn't fully distribute these awards to eligible projects and entities by October 30th, then the federal government would take it away and basically give it to other states. And there's actually a sooner deadline that's also important. The state has to submit their first report by August 30th, and that report will really help determine how much Idaho gets next year. It's a 5-year grant, so there's always a possibility if we're not hitting those metrics that the federal government wants to see, that we don't get as much money next year. So it's important that they have made enough progress that they can show that we can get at least the same amount of funding for next year as well.
Gotcha. Laura, thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Nate, you've got a great story about a picture of a group of teens. This was taken the day the Teton Dam collapsed, and the story includes how they reenacted the photo 50 years later. So describe the original photo. We're radio. We can't see it. Describe it and tell us how it came about.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So the original photo, you've got 11 teenagers who are standing on Main Street in Rexburg, and behind them, the road is flooded. There's probably 8 to 10 feet of water. And a lot of the guys have their shirts off. There's a few ladies in the picture, and they're all just hanging out. Apparently, this photo just kind of came to be that day, the day of the flood. It was taken on June 5th, 1976, the day that the dam collapsed. They were at Second and Main Street. They took the photo and went on with their day. Well, to commemorate the event, the 50th anniversary of the Teton Dam eruption, they got together earlier this month on the anniversary and took the exact same photo at the exact same spot. Now, unfortunately, one of the people has passed away, so not all 11 were there, but they stood in the positions that they were standing in 50 years ago. Obviously, the community looks very much different, and fortunately there wasn't 10 feet of water behind them, but. It's the first time in decades that many of these people have seen each other since then. So, yeah, it's pretty cool how they got together, and then they turned the reunion into kind of a little party. People came out to see them and to catch up and take photos and just be together again.
This is so cool. And it's all part of your It's Worth Mentioning podcast. Tell us about this podcast and what else that you have found worth mentioning in the past.
So Rhett Nelson, one of our reporters, has done a really good job with this. It's unique stuff to talk about. The fact of maybe it's about potato fields this week, or the Teton flood next week, or someone that started a egg plant. I mean, not just agriculture, but anything. And so he caught up with some of these young men who were in the episode, and how they decided to get a photographer to do this again, and to take the photo again. And every week, Rhett, he visits somebody different. We've really been focusing on the flood this year, the Teton Dam flood, because it was such an iconic moment in East Idaho history, and it's fascinating to hear all of these many, many stories.
Wow. And you mentioned you've got a ton of stories. A lot of these are from local folks talking about the day the dam collapsed, the aftermath. Give us a feel for some of the other things that are in this list.
It's one of those things, Samantha, if you're in East Idaho and you've been here a while, you can ask anybody, especially in the Rexburg area, were you here when the dam broke? Or were your parents here? And everybody, if they weren't here, they don't have a story. But if they were, yes, they know exactly where they were, or the stories they heard from their parents, or what they did, how they went up on the hill. I mean, everybody has some sort of connection to it. So we've interviewed truck drivers who were involved in constructing the dam. We've talked with a man who was there at the dam site. We talked to a couple who got married hours after the dam collapsed. And people who were left with nothing and had to rebuild. And it's interesting to hear them tell their stories. And you think about too, if this were to happen today, how would times be different? How would we handle it? Obviously, technology is different, the word getting out, but would we still lend in and help our neighbors? And I believe we would. I believe people in Idaho would do that.
Wow. It really has had a lasting impact. Especially in eastern Idaho. And with the 50th anniversary, I think a lot of people are learning the story maybe for the first time if they are just moving into the state. But it's kind of the zeitgeist.
And if you go back, you're right. So many people are aware, they don't know that this happened. But the dam is still there. You can go out and visit the site. It's now a historical place. But to go back and listen to the radio reports from that day, and to see even the television broadcast, there was a broadcast clip floating around social media from CBS News that night where they were reporting on it, and how they were able to get a crew in and get helicopter footage of the water coming down. But to hear the live radio feed as the dam is breaking and as they're telling people to get to high ground, I mean, it's mesmerizing. It's a mesmerizing piece of history that it's fortunate that we can go back and have these images and have this fun photo from 50 years ago and the historical footage, because it's part of our history. It's part of our state history. Biggest disaster our state has probably seen, at least East Idaho, and hopefully there's not one bigger to rival it.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I will say in the It's Worth Mentioning podcast, it's a nice long podcast talking with some of these folks who were involved in the photo, how, what they remember from that day, and how they brought everybody back together. It's quite the story.
Well, I mean, think about it too. Imagine going outside right now and taking a photo with some of your friends, and then getting together in 5 decades and redoing the photo when a lot of these people have moved out of Idaho. They don't live here anymore. Some haven't been back to Rexburg until now, but coming back and going back to that moment and having that connection on such a historical day and redoing the photo, it's pretty impressive.
It is, and it's a great story, very well told. Check it out at eastidahonews.com. Nate, you've got a story. I don't know how to really describe it. It involves a real estate agent. Break this down for me. What is going on with this story?
It is a real estate agent who also has some other companies. He owns a landscaping company
Mhm.
and is a registered agent of a development company, LSA Development. His name is Spencer Allred, and just this past week he was indicted on 10 felony counts of grand theft.
Ooh.
Now we don't know a lot of the details because it was a grand jury procedure. The grand jury hearing is how these charges came about, which are sealed in Idaho.
Mm.
And that's where the prosecutor goes in and basically explains, here's all of the evidence we have. Do you think there's enough here to charge this person? And the grand jury agreed that there was enough. We had been hearing allegations against this person for several years now, actually, and he's been involved in some civil litigation with different people. But the criminal complaint for these specific charges, the 10 felony counts of grand theft, say that between 2021 and 2023, he did willfully and wrongfully take cash over $1,000 from 10 different people and businesses with the intent to deprive the owner of the property. And so, yeah, that's where it's at now. We spoke with his attorney, and they intend to file a motion to dismiss the charges, and they're optimistic. His words, we are optimistic, and we'll see what happens with that.
All right. Well, we've got about 3 minutes left. Tell me about the Rexburg Rec Center. It doesn't exist yet, but some folks are trying to get one. But it's going to take some taxpayer dollars. Tell us about a meeting on Monday in the community to talk about this.
This has been a dream of many people in the Rexburg community for years to have an indoor rec center. Rexburg is not known to have the nicest of winters, and there is an outdoor pool, but you can use that 3 or 4 months a year, and winter often in many years stays much longer. Jackson Hole, Wyoming has a beautiful indoor rec center that has slides and pools, and it's just well known for being such a great rec center. And that's what many people in Rexburg are hoping to do. And so this was a meeting that they want to create a rec center or an auditorium district, you could say, which would fund a rec center and an event center through a 5% tax on hotel stays and short-term rentals. They want to do that rather than using property taxes. The other option is, with that and what there could be bonding done. They're trying to figure this out. There's nothing set in stone that they would need about $10 million to get this to happen. They also would accept donations, and that this auditorium district 5% tax would help cover that. There's a lot of support for it in the community, especially there's a lot of, young kids in Rexburg. They've come up with just some basic plans, nothing set in stone, but it could include sports fields and courts and event meeting spaces, after school programs, indoor play areas, pools, stuff like that. So it's just getting going. They're trying to get the ball rolling. They've set up a website that has the information on it, and they're hoping that they can get the support of people in the area.
Wow. Okay. And if it did become an auditorium district, just in the last minute we have left, that would take a vote, right? When's the earliest that could happen?
Right. It would take a vote. They would have to get it on the ballot. I'm not sure of the specific date, but you would have to get the public to support it. And then when it would go into effect, the 5% local sales tax, that's also unclear at the moment too. But it looks like May of 2027 could be the ballot measure, and they would need 50% plus one to pass. So you've got to have 50% plus one, and then it could go into effect right away. Idaho Falls does have an auditorium district, and so it is something that has been successful here. So we'll see if it happens in Rexburg as well.
Nate, thank you so much. This has been great.
Here, thank you. Have a good weekend.
All right, you too. We've been speaking with Nate Eaton, news director at EastIdahoNews.com. We also had Laura Guido with the Idaho Capital Sun, and Kevin Fixler, investigative reporter with the Idaho Statesman.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Idaho Matters. And for quick news of the day, start your mornings with our podcast. It's called The Connector, Idaho Daily News. Just by listening, you're helping to support public radio right here in Idaho. And I want to say a big thank you for that.
Each story you hear on Planet Money starts with a question. What happens if we refund tariffs? Why are groceries so expensive? At NPR, we stand for your right to be curious, because the forces shaping our world can be hard to see. follow NPR's Planet Money wherever you get your podcasts and start seeing how the economy really works.